5:01. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Town Council, nighttime edition. This is when we have our budget hearings and millage hearings, and we're required by state law to hold these at night. Here we are this evening. It's 5:01. All council members are present, and will stand for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
We gather together here today intent on doing good work. We seek to represent fairly and well those who have given us this task. May our efforts be blessed with insight, guided by understanding and wisdom. We seek to serve with respect for all. May our personal faiths give us strength to act honestly and well in all matters before us. Amen.
Amen. Before the pledge, I just want to take a moment here. I think it's entirely proper this time that we pause and remember for a moment our friend Bob Raymond, who passed away this week. Bob was a true New England Yankee who embraced his work ethic up in his home state of New Hampshire, where he sat on the planning board, the police commission, and the school board, amongst other activities that he was involved with up there. When he moved down here to Fort Myers Beach, he embraced his new home, serving his community here in several different committees, including the LPA, and was on the town council as a councilman, vice mayor, and mayor. And in addition to that, as if he hadn't served enough, he was also a fire commissioner here on the beach. We remember Bob today. He passed away 2 days ago. We keep Donna, his wife, and Brian, his son, in our thoughts and prayers. We thank Bob for his service to the town of Fort Myers Beach. With that, we'll say the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. The next item is the approval of the final agenda. Is there a motion to approve the final agenda?
Moved.
Moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any objection? Passes unanimously. Okay, the next item, as always, is public comment. Madam Clerk.
I have a request from Len Lemmer.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you all again. My name is Len Lemmer. I own Nervous Nelly's Restaurant. And I'm here today to ask the council to consider leasing a small piece of Bayside Park to Nervous Nelly's. We would move our hostess stand from the restaurant out into the park area. Why, you ask? 2 reasons. Number one, it would give us the opportunity to lead people out to our patio without them coming inside the restaurant, which, given health situation now, we see as an advantage. Number two, we intend, if we can come to some understanding, to place 2 propane heaters on either side of our hostess stand. These would be the heaters with the glass tubes that put off a fair amount of light that would hopefully extend down San Carlos a bit. We feel the area around Nervous Nelly's, and as you look down from the Yucatan, is dark and looks unsafe at times to people who come into our community. Lastly, we would like to continue having an ongoing discussion that there would be some continuity between the developments that are planned at at the square and at Bayfront Park. We've already discussed talking about having lighting down there, a walking pier, fountain, and shades. Sunshades. I would only ask that those discussions continue, and as you get closer to an answer, we would like to be involved, if we could be, in those discussions. Lastly, from the standpoint of the lease, I want everyone here to know that we are extremely flexible. In other words, in the situation where the park itself might be rented to an individual to have a wedding or something in the park, we would happily relent, not set up for a day, so that we can make any kind of an agreement that we would come to as flexible as we possibly could, with the idea that, you know, we're all neighbors here, we can make this work. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next request is from John Heim.
Thanks, Council. Nice to see everybody back in action
You
again.
can pull that down. You don't have to wear that when you're.
Sure, thank you kindly. Nonetheless, my name is John Heim, 40-year resident now. It's been a while. Very much involved in water quality, run a group called the Southwest Florida Clean Water Movement, had many of interactions with past councils. We're very excited to see a new council. A lot of you guys are very privy to information about the local water problems. A couple things I want to speak of today, and I'll try to be brief, and some of the problems that are still occurring. In other words, past administrations, I guess you could say, they did approve signage on the beach, okay? But some accesses do have signs, some do not, with QR codes. We had to ask for that, and that was passed into, law, basically. And when you use the actual smartphone to the QR code, the link does not work and has never worked. So we want to know why that does not work and when it's going to work. Taxpayers paying for it. Another thing we want to speak about real quickly is during a time when you had a natural resource director, was passed into law that they would, the council would put into a budget item, and you can look this up in your records, that it was approved to test the Back Bay. And that was through your natural resource director, Ray Blake. With us. Very young, intelligent person who was the natural resource director, who was swiftly put into stormwater out of her real element. But her job was to test this water, and the job was to be transparent about giving the information to the general public about what was in the water when it comes to her findings. That information was never relinquished at all. As a matter of fact, when asked presently to, ex-mayor Saracita, she said the records never existed, as if the tests were never taken. When we spoke to Ray Blake, this is all just on hearsay, she said that she didn't know how to decipher the raw data. And nonetheless, that's taxpayers' money, that's on record, and, it was a budget item. So are we still paying for water testing? Are we still conducting water testing? And where is the information after 4 years now? Number three, I'll make it brief, is the road construction. The city has allowed the, basically of runoff into the Back Bay. I don't have to remind you, the Estero Aquatic Preserve was the first protected body of water in the state of Florida. And here we are allowing a construction company to build coverts and pump their chemicals and who knows what else right down to people's canals, and making these canals extremely dangerous, which I don't have to mind you, have never been dredged in history, these canals. So we also ask for the town to take consideration to look into these items I already spoke of, and to also consider dredging the canals once and for all, and treat the canals like a roadway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next request is from Matt Fleming. I have no other requests, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll move on. The next item is local achievements and recognitions. I will start with you, Councilman Allers.
I have nothing at this time, Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
I'd like to thank the TDC and Lee County for the excellent work they did in Matanzas Pass Preserve. I went out and checked out the park today. They had a grand opening. I don't think they had a grand reopening because of COVID, but it is reopened. It looks like they've replaced 80-90% of the boardwalk. It's been a huge project. They've added a lot of benches. There's a new floating kayak dock. Work all looks excellent. It's a beautiful place to take a walk, and I thank them for accomplishing those things for our town.
A couple quick things. I'd like to commend our fellow Councilman Allers for the excellent Sheriff Outreach Center that opened yesterday, a beautiful ceremony. All the council was there in attendance with Councilor Allers, but he took a leadership role in this. Chamber President Jackie Lisak was there, Sheriff Carmine was there, his whole team, a lot of folks who donated materials and labor were there, and it was just a very impressive effort and an impressive facility, and I just commend our colleague for taking a leadership role on that. Second of all, I had a chance last week to go out and tour the Friends of the Lovers Key, Florida Parks and Park Service Welcome and Discovery Center. It's a huge new facility there, primarily educational in nature, and it's phenomenal. It's a massive building that'll be utilized for a wide variety of purposes. And if you haven't had a chance to check it out, I would reach out to those folks and take a look at it. For anybody who's interested in further supporting that effort out there, we're looking for discovery partners, which would entitle you to be on their donor wall. And they're also offering naming rights for various aspects of the facility. So it'll be a great addition to our community and to our park. And just commend Deb for her efforts in fundraising and all the folks involved in that project. Thank you.
Well, with the risk of not sounding original, I'd like to commend Councilman Allers and Jackie in the chamber and the workers and the sheriff who put that together. I think that now a lot of it falls on, I think, our plate to make as much benefit as we can while it's there. Similarly, I did go through the Matanzas Pass Preserve. It's a really nice boardwalk. They meander around the vegetation and things and really give you a feel that wasn't there with the old boardwalk, I think. And likewise, I went and saw the Lovers Key. Too. Really excellent. I think there's a lot that our education facilities can do to coordinate with them to make it a real experience, because they are the second most visited state park in Florida, and so that's a big draw to our area that can both ways.
Thank you. I'm going to add my congratulations to Councilman Allers as well. It's a great facility. It's great to have the sheriff and his presence down there, and the ladies staffing it during the daytime. It'll be a nice little resource for people to drop in and say hello. Lovers Key Welcome Center, I haven't been over yet to see it. I served as the president of folks for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, I guess, back in the early days, and that was the dream back then, was to have a welcome center. And of course, after I left, fresh blood came in, and they really pushed it, and that's where it is today. So I congratulate Debbie and the crew down there who have done such a great job. Park has come a long way in a relatively short period of time. Remember down there with the early people and actually hacking the original trails out of there, out to the beach, you know. So it's come a long way, and as you say, Bill, it's the second most visited state park in the state of Florida, and they get close to 1 million visitors a year there, and it's great to have them as a neighbor. I wanted them one time to be in our town, but I didn't get the support of the council at the time. I think I would have done better now, but anyhow. That being said, we'll move on. The next item is advisory committee items and reports, and I think we have a report from Steve Johnson tonight from the Marine Resources Task Force.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. In part of your agenda package, you've received some slides here. The Got the Marine Resource Task Force, new chairman, got a new team, really. A lot of vacancies were filled. And what we'll be looking at here is really a list of issues and individual interests of the members of the group, and we'd like help getting started. So some help prioritizing the list. I think there's 10 items on here, not including the ongoing projects. But let me touch on those first, and then we'll dig into some of the prospective projects that we'd like to get started on. Currently, the 2 items that are ongoing is one is the yellow-bellied slider turtle sales on the beach. I think you're all familiar with that issue. The recommendation was forthcoming, but since we had our meeting last night, yesterday afternoon, we do have 2 recommendations. The first is simply to adopt the federal law that prohibits the sale of turtles less than 4 inches. There's a federal law, the FDA law, prohibits the sale really to prevent the contraction of salmonella. Or maybe 2, depending on how council would like to approach it, is to just completely eliminate the sale of reptiles on Fort Myers Beach. Had a good discussion, and we thought they're probably one of the most invasive animals on the beach. So does it even make sense to sell reptiles in general? And that would be more of an umbrella approach. So back with 5-inch turtles and start selling them. Those are sort of the 2 options. And the second ongoing project is the Estero Boulevard roading lighting project. MRF has been added along with the Public Safety Committee to be represented on the Project Advisory Committee. And I know that'll get started here after the bids are open at the end of the month. So moving on, and please interrupt me if you need to. We've really got 10 items here that I just want to touch on. We don't dig in super deep on what we're going to do. We first want guidance from you, and then we'll start to put some thought into it. First is invasive species. It's really an ongoing issue on the island. So, do we need to attack that through education, legislation, outreach programs? So I'll just go ahead and continue through the list. Again, if you've got comments. Dune management and education. Recently, there's been a number of gross infractions on the beach. I think, in general, the current ordinances and direction might need review and modernization. We've had skid steers moving dunes behind homes, which is what I would call a gross infraction. Third would be beach raking.
Whom?
I'm not exactly sure who the offender was. I know the home, but there's been 2 of them.
Is the homeowner doing it, or is this?
One, I believe, was the homeowner. Yeah, I think just maybe rented the skid steer, came back and started.
I think in the last magistrate hearing, there was actually one where they both had the contractor and the homeowner for the magistrate.
That was more mid-island, and there's one a little further north. I'm not sure it wasn't this owner, actually. So again, I think the thought there was, is it time to just dig in there a little bit and find out what needs to be done. Beach raking. So in this instance, there's been raking over beach accesses, which I'm not sure is allowable, but also just programs to promote the dune development. I think our brand here is a natural beach, so reinforce the benefits of having a natural beach and organisms that live on the beach. So as I continue on here, what you could do is just put little hash marks next to it if you want us to work on that. And we'll count them up. The fertilizer ordinance. Maybe in February, right before the COVID started, we did send out and develop the new ordinance, the model ordinance for fertilizer. But we're wondering if you would like content, some ideas as an outreach, talk to landscaping organizations. But it's, we feel like maybe it's still the best kept secret. Unless the homeowners and the commercial customers are aware of it, then we don't really have a prayer of enforcing it.
Interrupt you. Is that something, Roger, that we could have our PIO work with the committee?
Right,
Educate about the fertilizer ordinance?
Yeah, really, the best way would be for committee and the liaison to work together with Jenny to get something out.
Do you know Jennifer?
I did. I actually met her today. Yeah,
Great,
and
great.
to her benefit, there has been some notification, but I just feel, we feel like it needs to be widespread. through some of, I think, the town newsletter, which has been a fantastic, absolutely fantastic tool for us to update it.
Steve, has it been your experience that the licensed landscapers who do work on Fort Myers Beach are aware of the ordinance?
No, I wouldn't think so. I don't know personally, but we thought maybe they ought to sit a video here in town and a sticker for their truck, so as they're going by applying fertilizer, we can tell that they're doing it properly.
Just wonder if a list of those entities could be somehow collected and then and do what you just talked about, have a little education a session maybe here at the town or maybe through their licensing process. I assume that's a state license, Roger, I'm guessing. If they're going to do work here on the island, they have a certain education level with respect to, our ordinances and so forth on fertilizer. Thinking out loud.
Yep.
I think Sanibel has something, a program like that.
Very timely. I mean, one of the big elements of that is that if you're going to have your lawn fertilized, you need to have your soil tested to actually ensure nutrients. I'm pretty sure nobody's getting.
Roger, is it possible to get this ordinance with anybody that's coming in to maybe potentially do a permit for any kind of professional landscaper coming in to provide the information for them when they actually apply for a permit? Another way of spreading the information around.
We'll talk with our two environmental staff persons and our other members of our team and come back with a recommendation to the committee on how we might be able to better address this.
I do believe that Chad mentioned coming up with a translator to also translate into Spanish some of the instructions, regulations, so we can.
Make them multilingual.
Next on the list, and halfway through, the Reef Safe sunscreen products. There had been discussion of whether or not something can be done to ensure that all the sunscreen products on the beach are reef safe, but that is preempted by state legislation. So the idea would be for MRF to just put together some type of outreach program, maybe a pledge drive of some type where people pledge to sell reef safe and reef safe emblems on their, again, we're big on emblems, I guess, but on their place of business, as well as maybe displays. I think that's something that can add value.
Do you have one that you, sorry to interrupt, but do you have one that you prefer? Not to necessarily give a name, I guess, if you don't want to, but
We have Nivea. It's a product that's is reef safe, but there's quite a few. I'm actually not. A lot of these are individual interests, I think, of the MRF members, and there's two people that are really it's really high on their list and can really fill you in and probably make good recommendations too, Dan. 6 is filling holes on the beach. I think everybody recognizes it's a safety issue, certainly, especially at night. For humans, and it also interferes with nesting turtles and hatchlings. So how do we solve this problem? So do we need to investigate maybe all the options that we could possibly have to solve that problem, because we feel like it is a problem. So that's one. Next page here, there's 4 left there. Number 7 is the Big Carlos Bridge rubble. So that project is I think starting, is on the list and is moving forward. We'd like to investigate creating a Fort Myers Beach artificial reef with the bridge rubble. We can look at Naples' best practices. They put maybe 40 or 50 in the last, maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago. I think the city of Naples. But there's ways to get grants through the Coastal Conservation Association, as well as I believe the West Coast Inland Navigation District also has funds available. So we feel like it's something that can be literally no cost to the town. Organize this and get the permitting and actually have it off our beach. The town's input.
not to interrupt again, but Roger, this is very interesting to me. I wanted to ask about this. Is this something that would fall within the town's purview, or would it be something more that the county would handle if you go past the 1,000 feet?
Well, it would go past, be if outside the town's jurisdiction if it exceeds our, our municipal limits. But I can tell you that when I was in Collier County, we worked with Collier County to position artificial reefs throughout road project trails that were either left over or abandoned as part of the improvement project. So, for example, concrete wastewater pipes that weren't utilized, sections that were cut off because, they needed to make something fit. We take all that spare material and use it to make a reef. But to have a reef of any consequence, you have to assemble quite a bit of it.
I think we can advocate for it, even though it's not within our jurisdiction to dictate it. We can certainly work to advocate for.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
Well, it's Lee County's rubble.
Exactly.
That's where we start. And then 9 miles out is the state water. That's next.
Yeah, I mean, the artificial reefs that are off of Fort Myers Beach already are Lee County artificial reefs. Also, regarding the bridge project is that we ensure that there remains some type of a fishing availability, the availability to fish. So quite often they leave the old platform to fish off of. From a viewpoint, I'm not sure that's that's an option, I should say, but also even potentially ensure that it has a fishing platform underneath it, like they do at Montana West Bridge.
I actually spoke at the last hearing for the county commissioners, and I know I wasn't getting anywhere with what I was advocating. It was to leave either a new bridge the same height or just leave the bridge the way it is, but that wasn't going anywhere. But I did make a pitch at the end for a fishing pier, because if they build the high bridge, which they say they're going to build, which I know that they are, that I said, well, you're eliminating one of the fishingest bridges in the state of Florida, if not the country, if not the world for that matter. So they did say that they would look into the possibility of building something underneath the fishing, some sort of fishing platform underneath the bridge. So that's on their radar now. We'll have to stay on them to make sure they follow up on it.
Next up here are really two boat type initiatives. One would be just investigating the boat pump outs. I know that there's obviously we service those boats. We have a boat pump out for the town. The question is there regulations? Are they enforced? And we think the Coast Guard actually is responsible for enforcement. There are ways to lock heads while you are moored, but is it enforced? And also, is it actually polluting? And that there is a project based to start to measure the E. coli in the bay and differentiate between animal E. coli and human E. coli. So that was an interest of one of the members, and also derelict vessels. So it seems like there's more and more. There's grant money available through the state. Are we pursuing that? Can we pursue it? Should we look into it a little bit more and see if we can't clean up some of these derelict vessels that are polluting our waters?
At this point, I'd jump in and say, if you have particular members that are interested in those boat issues, that maybe they would listen to the AAC meetings, because we do a lot of discussion of those issues, and they could learn a lot about what enforcement is happening. Austin is really on it. More happening than people realize.
Right.
And they're welcome to come to the AAC meetings as well.
All right.
Or if it does have one member who is on both.
Dual member?
Figure
Yeah, yep. Yeah.
Holmes? Okay.
I think he's,
Okay, well, he'll be our megaphone. So those are the list. Is there anything that maybe reached your top three to start working on and you find would be of most interest for the town?
I think they're all important. I'm
Okay.
thrilled to see you're looking at them. Like I said, the boat issues, I think the AAC is really working on those, so of all of them, to me, that would be the ones that Murph wouldn't have to put as much effort into because we've already got a committee working on it. But I'm in favor of moving forward with all of the rest.
I think there's a number of items here that access to the PIO would be useful. Not just the, you talked about the fertilizer, but the reef-safe sunscreen. You know, the idea we talked about is trying to work with the commercial entities on the island, put like a, if they're selling something, they get a, you know, sticker with the town logo on it that says reef-safe sunscreens available inside, advertising for them. The filling holes on the beach is another good one for that. Invasive species, I think, would be another one. One of the questions in invasive species is, let's say someone has a Brazilian pepper in their yard or on the street or something, and they want to get rid of it. What's the town willing to do to help them eradicate the invasive species? Certainly have people who can go and identify them, but then removing them can be a costly item.
Do we have anything budgeted so far for eradication of invasive species? Do we have anything in the budget for that at all?
I know that we have a sort of a specific line item for that.
That's something we ought to consider. Those lines, recurring line item every year, where somebody may be able to come and get the help doing that. We really have to stay on top of those, otherwise they just propagate.
Maybe at least match funds, maybe, so all on our dime.
And even, you know, on any town property or anything, I imagine we probably take good.
This maybe we can, you know, the committee can provide us with some guidelines and rules and, you know, framework of a program, and then we could see what that potentially would cost, and we can go through the budget and see if we can find, might be able to be.
That's good.
Very timely.
I think I was talking to the attorney about the yellow belly slider. He thought we already had a resolution on that legally. So that was something he's going to work on to see if, in fact.
Yeah, this was brought to the attention of the town council. Some of you were here, and we were asked to look into a resident came to the town council and said, "Hey, were you aware this was happening? Is there something that you can do?" And so, at the request of the council, we staff looked into it. Mr. Schutz and myself looked into it, and we identified that there's an existing federal law that prohibits the sale of turtles of any kind that are less than 4 inches. That certainly would be the type that the person who came to the council meeting identified. We shared that information with that individual. He was happy to know that there was the federal law was out there, and that's essentially where it was left, because there is a federal agency that does have substantive responsibility for enforcing that regulation. The Councilmember Veach has indicated it appears that the case with a lot of federal agencies, apparently they're not taking their responsibility seriously. So if it's the will of the council, we'll draft up a prohibition. It would be essentially duplicative of the federal law, but that's certainly within your authority, and that's your direction, we'll do so.
Federal law is 4 inches, though, right?
That's correct.
I'd be in favor of a complete prohibition of all sizes, personally. If we're going to do it, why just replicate what the feds have done? Let's really make it serious.
Is there any preemption laws you're aware of?
No.
There's no big business in favor of yellow-bellied sliders.
Not yet.
Not yet. Shh. So I will work with Mr. Schutz, and we'll put something together and hopefully be able to bring it to you at the next MNP meeting.
Anything else, Chairman?
That's it. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your report.
I'm going to bring one thing up that we talked about but isn't on your list because it came up later, and that's our reusable bag program. We went down the road with this quite a ways. We had 80% maybe committed, the sponsors, before the COVID outbreak. And that was a double whammy for us because both businesses were hurt financially, plus the idea of reusing something and bringing something into a store was frowned upon. But that's still on our radar, and one thing we actually discussed is we're kind of finding that trying to do a program like that with a once-a-month meeting among volunteers is a little cumbersome. Maybe try to find a nonprofit on the island who's willing to take.
Thank you, Steve, for your report and all the good work that the Marine Resources Task Force does. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, the next item is the approval of the minutes from the August 17th, 2020 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of August 17th, 2020.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussions, additions, or corrections? Yes,
Mr.
Councilman.
Mayor, I don't normally nitpick at minutes, but on page 16, the fifth paragraph from the bottom, first sentence, if I could just have the clerk just change the word alleviate to enhance. I'm sure I didn't use the word alleviate. Alleviate changes the meaning of the sentence. So it would just that one little tweak.
I will accept your friendly amendment, Mr. Adderholt.
You're trying to rewrite history, huh?
Not really. I don't use the word alleviate.
Okay, it's been amended, and you second the amendment.
Second the amendment.
And further discussion? Any objection? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next item is a follow-up presentation given by Attorney Ellen Bogdanoff on the status over at the Lani Kai. Attorney Bogdanoff?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I appreciate the opportunity. As you all recall, I was brought in by the Lani Kai because of the discussions that emerged on the nuisance abatement board. They asked me to come in and do an analysis of their operations to see what they could do to reduce the usage of the town resources, which seemed to be of concern to the town council as well as some of the residents. So I just wanted to share with you, originally I was going to do a PowerPoint, but it just didn't seem to fit into a PowerPoint what I had to say. So I thought maybe we could have a dialogue. One of the first things I did in terms of evaluating their operations from a risk management standpoint was to look at the calls. We walked through it with the sheriff's office and decided that we would pull only 2019 because to go through 3,000 calls was going to take them about 3 or 4 weeks to pull. We knew we were on a deadline. We said that we were going to come back before the second reading of the ordinance to try to give you an update. And we found some interesting stuff, and I did listen to your meeting where the sheriff spoke, the sheriff's office spoke, and it's not inconsistent with what we found. There were, in 2019, and keep in mind, the reason that I did the in-depth analysis of all of the CAD files for all of the calls was because in order for me to make appropriate recommendations, I wanted to make sure that it was going to solve a problem. In my world, what you do is you either have to make changes to your operations to reduce your risk, or you can transfer that risk to an insurance policy. Obviously, some of the things that happen within a business, insurance is not going to cover. So there's other things that you can do. Total calls for 2019 were 868. To give you a perspective, the data points in the CAD files show that about 646 of those calls were not related to the Lani Kai, which seems to be consistent with what the sheriff said. There were 327 area checks, and I know that one of the council members had stated in the meeting that, well, area checks are where they go to places where there are issues, and I'm sure that's true, but also keep in mind that the Lani Kai has offered the sheriff's office parking spots on their lot because they have trouble parking, especially during season. So there's a lot of activity with the sheriff's office there. I don't want to necessarily not continue to provide that opportunity for them because they think it's important, especially for the north end of the island. There were 100, and I'll break it down for you a little bit more in terms of to show you what that 868 was involved. There were 222 of the total calls that were worthy of further investigation to see exactly what they were and what was going on. 158 of the 868 had no information, which was consistent with what I heard the sheriff's office say, that hang-ups, people call, they change their mind, they're walking past the Lani Kai and they say, I'm near the Lani Kai, because it is a landmark for this island, so it's very easy for people to reference. They'll say, I'm downtown, I'm at the town square, I'm at the Lani Kai, I'm at, the Mermaid. There are certain places where it's easy for people to identify their location. There were 58 traffic stops. Had nothing to do with the Lani Kai. They probably just pulled into the lot because it was convenient for them to do that. But the vast majority of the 868 calls that were not reviewed were basically the area checks. We have a breakdown of the 222 that we pulled. Interestingly enough, what I kind of observed is you had 70 that were labeled disturbance, and you had another 70 that were labeled disturbance, and then you had another one that was trespass, about 70 that were trespass. So when you add those two together, that's 120 calls of things just happening on the property. I think we know that, Fort Myers Beach is a fun place to come. I had heard the vice mayor talk about, alcohol sometimes being a problem and creating issues. That's one of the areas where I had to focus, because employee training is going to reduce a lot of those calls to. What they do is, we've recommended a training program for not only their security staff, but for other staff members, that when you kind of have unruly people, not every call is deserving of calling the sheriff's office. I think there was a sense where, let's just be safe and call, whether it be to remove somebody from the property because they were being a little wild, or whatever those issues are. So we feel like a lot of those calls will probably go away with proper training of the staff. Ones that, there were another 33 that were medical assistants. I'm sure you don't want them to stop bringing in the sheriff if there's something that there's a problem. It's people get, overheated on the beach. Sometimes they drink too much. Those were some of the medical assistance calls, were 33. There were a significant number, especially the 152, which we found were not related, like a little 8-year-old boy who's wandering the parking lot because he lost his parents. They weren't guests of the Lani Kai, he just lost his parents. There was another one where there was a homeless citizen that was asked to be removed from the sidewalk. So again, the Lani Kai's address is being used because it's a landmark location. When we dig deeper, there were some incidents that were worthy of police involvement, clearly. We had few where there was a couple of domestic violence. I don't know what you do about that, but unfortunately sometimes when people drink, they get angry, they get a little bit, out of control. We had, I think the one that, I found, you find troubling is like when you look at the content of the nuisance abatement board, where can they be impacted by it? Where can any business be impacted by it? Because it's not just obviously the Lani Kai that would be responsible, to make sure that they didn't have to come before the nuisance abatement board, and that would be drug use, right? Drug sales on the property. Well, we had 4 calls back to drugs. 3 of them set up by the sheriff's office. Came onto the property, they approached somebody at the bar, and I think they scored a joint. We were talking about marijuana. One was a vape pen. So there really didn't appear to be any evidence that there's widespread drug activity on the property. Calls specifically came and were set up by the sheriff's office. So basically,
Can I interrupt?
Yes, sure.
I really don't understand that. If the police had set it up, why would they be calling it in?
It was a report.
Okay, there's a report. So we've been apparently using terms interchangeably that don't mean the same thing. And I've been told that there are 800 calls. I'm assuming those are coming from outside the sheriff's office. So the 800 that you got, some of them came from inside the sheriff's office?
All those particular, what happened is when we pulled the CAD files, these were, I think the issue is when did the sheriff's office have to get involved in activity at the Lani Kai? So the one that was most concerning to me, because when you look at the other one, and to your point, if you could put in alcohol, abuse as part of the ordinance, there would be a lot more activity for the nuisance abatement board. But you can't do that by Florida statute. one issue of concern that kind of came out, because the rest, there really wasn't any that was problematic, was the drugs. And those were reports done and put into the CAD files. They weren't necessarily calls, but they were part of the reports. So we pulled all reports the sheriff's office had of activity that was supposedly on the Lani Kai.
Okay, so you're looking at different statistics than what people were coming in and quoting to us, because what people were coming in and quoting to us was calls for assistance from that area. So we can't necessarily interface these two sets of numbers because they're different things.
Well, it's all the same numbers. They're just categorizing them differently and sensationalizing some of those numbers to make it look like the Lani Kai has the police at their property like every day, 5 times a day. So what you do is when you drill down into the detail and you actually pull the files for those quote-unquote calls, most of them, the vast majority of them, had nothing to do with the Lani Kai. They were in and around the Lani Kai. I mean, we did have 222 that we went into in detail, but, you know, when you look and you say 33 are medical assistants, I mean, that's, you know, you want people calling. You don't want people to fear calling that, you know, their property is going to look like they're overutilizing town resources. This was about, for us, the complaints being that the Lani Kai had a disproportionate use of law enforcement. That's simply not the case when you drill down into, and I believe the quote from the sheriff, if I'm not mistaken, was they're 2% of the calls. I think they recognize that a lot of people are using 1400 as an address because it is a landmark location. So it's hard for me to recommend to a client changes to their operations if I don't understand what's going on the property. We'll tell you what they are guilty of. They are guilty of wanting to be the place that people come, have fun, and it's affordable. It's been very open, but we're no longer in the 70s and the 80s, and times have changed. One of the key recommendations will be to reduce access to the property. A lot of the properties that you look at have fences around them. They can't just walk in every single corridor. That there will be controlled access, more controlled access to the property, so that they can avoid a lot of the people who are walking down, you know, Estero to basically come onto the property and say, hey, well, let's go get another one at the Lani Kai. And that's what you're kind of finding.
And if I may, just while we're still focused on numbers, I'm curious, numbers from the Sheriff's Department are a bit confusing. Are you saying the 327 area checks are because the Lani Kai offers the Sheriff's Department free parking? Is that the reason why they do area checks?
No.
Because that seems different from what I heard from the officers I spoke with.
No, that's not. I'm sorry if I didn't make myself clear. A lot of the calls or a lot of the incidents that are happening in the evaluation, and by the way, anecdotally, this is what the folks at the Lani Kai believe to be true, that when people are walking around and creating disturbances like the homeless man on the street or whatever, because the police are pretty much parked there, the sheriff is pretty much parked there, they're kind of, and they're going after people that are creating disturbances, that happens to be the address they're using. I mean, what do you do when you have to create a report and they want an address and you're taking somebody who's homeless off the sidewalk because they're laying across the sidewalk? What address do you use? You can't use just somewhere along the boulevard. They want to be specific. So what we're finding is their address is thrown into the CAD files a lot of time because the officers in particular are in around that area. As far as the checks, they come in and, you know, quite frankly, a lot of times and I'm talking to the folks at the Lani Kai, they come in, they chit-chat. I mean, they've been around here for 40 years. They're very generous to the community. The officers very often come by to say hi and to check on them like they do a lot of the other properties.
Ellen, was it your experience in terms of your research that the Outrigger, Diamond Head, and Pink Shell had a similar number of area checks, their facilities?
I didn't pull their files. That is, number one, it's a huge expense. I don't, you know, when you look at the Lani Kai's footprint and you have the sheriff's office saying it's 2% of the calls, I don't think that that's unreasonable. I don't think their calls are disproportionate from what I see. especially in looking at the research and pulling articles and pulling news clips of things that have happened on the island. It's unfortunate, you know, there's crime, but I think the sheriff is doing an excellent job, and I think he is working to reduce it by having a greater presence, and I think that's an important thing to do.
The 2% number did not include area checks, that's my understanding, is that correct?
That was my understanding when I listened to them speak.
The 2% number fascinates me, and my colleague, Councilor Veach, is a lot better at math than I am. But with the information we got from the Fort Myers Beach Fire Department, and I assume you analyzed that as well, in 2020, the number of visits to the 1400 Estero Boulevard was 70. The nearest, the second place address was 29. Seems like it's not 2%, not even close. I was curious if you analyzed the fire department's numbers as well and had any thoughts on that.
Well, those are medical assist. What I see is there were 33 medical assists in last year, the Lani Kai, that the sheriff also came to. That's usually where they bring out the fire department as well as the sheriff also joins. That's 33. If there's more, and keep in mind, somebody gets heat stroke or there's an incident on, and I did not do the analysis of the fire, quite frankly, because to me, when somebody calls 911 for fire, that's a whole different issue. I'm not here to analyze why people feel the need that they have to get medical assistance. I mean, I don't think that's...
Okay, well, let me just ask you, though, in 2019, 1400 Estero Boulevard, the Lani Kai address, had 100 visits. The next closest location on the island had 46. Is it unusually warm in the Lani Kai area? Is that where the heat stroke? I mean, there must be some reason for this discrepancy, right? I mean,
Well, I think perhaps maybe you should bring in the fire department to find out exactly what those calls are. Again, like I said to you, I'm here from a risk management standpoint. You can't really bring people before a nuisance abatement board to say to them, you have too many medical calls, so you have to make sure that, you know, people aren't on the beach or make sure that elderly people don't slip and fall. I mean, things happen. I don't know those calls, and nor do I know whether or not they were all actually at the Lani Kai or perhaps maybe on the beach where the Lani Kai, again, address was used. But I would suggest that you bring in the fire department to find out if there is an abuse. But I am not here to analyze why anybody would want medical assistance. That's not appropriate for me to do. That's not my expertise.
so you don't think it's appropriate to look at why the Lani Kai address has twice as many calls as the next highest property on the island? If you're doing a risk management assessment, that
Not from a medical assistance standpoint, no. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to, absolutely not. It's not
think
appropriate for me to do.
is there a difference in the terrain there, or are people?
I would suspect, actually, that the same thing is happening in the fire department that's happening in the sheriff's office, where the Lani Kai address is being used, and it's in and around the Lani Kai, and it's not necessarily directly related to them. Now, whether or not we want to verify that, I would suggest that's something important for the council to do. Bring in the fire department and see. But if somebody feels compelled to call 911 for medical assistance, I don't care where they are, if they're on the sidewalk, if they're on the other side of the street, if they're on the beach adjacent to the Lani Kai, they're using their address the same way the sheriff's office has been using their address when it's not necessarily attributable to them.
So when it's 100 to 46, the second largest number of runs is 46, Lani Kai is 100. You don't believe in doing a risk management assessment that you would look at that information for fire and medical runs? That wouldn't be a...
I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to advise the Lani Kai as to when they should tell people or, well, you know what, you're too elderly, so we don't really want you coming to our hotel because maybe you have to call 911. It's just inappropriate. I mean, there's a variety of reasons why people call 911. No, that's not my expertise.
Do you think there's
you're asking me the same question, I'm going to give you the same answer. I am not going to get involved in
But this
medical.
isn't an adversarial, this is supposed to be a dialogue. I mean, it strikes us as odd, and I think you're a smart person, it strikes us as odd that twice as many runs from the next highest address, our fire and our ambulances are going there. Wouldn't that, how could you not consider that as a factor? Are people...
What do you think that would suggest?
It seems like people are getting hurt. There must be some need for an ambulance to go. There can't be all heat stroke because it's not that much warmer than it is at the pig shell.
Let me
or
share
the
something
outlet,
with you that
the
might
outrigger. Yeah.
help answer your question. And again, I will say to you, if you look at the pattern of behavior of 911 calls or the sheriff's office, they're using the Lani Kai address. But more importantly, the other thing that I did is I looked at their loss runs, because if you have an operation that seems to have all of these problems, it's going to be reflective on the claims that they have. So if people are falling or getting sick or being injured on their property, they're going to have claims up the wazoo, and they don't. I was shocked at how few claims they actually have for a large, active property on the island. So if I have to look at analysis of slip and fall and people getting injured and calling 911, I'm going to look at insurance claims. Because generally speaking, if people get hurt and they feel it's the responsibility of the property that they're on, they're going to sue them, and that's going to be an insurance claim. So that, to me, is where I'm going to look, but I'm not going to do an analysis as to whether or not somebody should or should not have called 911 and whether or not they were on the property. I'm going to make probably a leap here and say that the same thing is happening at the fire department, is happening at the sheriff's office. They are a targeted address because it's easy for people to say, I fell, I'm injured, where are you? Oh, I'm near the Lani Kai, because it is easy for people to find. It's a large footprint on this island, and if you're in and around it, I sure as heck want to get 911 there as soon as possible. I'm going to give them a landmark so they know they can find me.
And that's fair. I guess it's fair, but I'm thinking to myself, risk management, full assessment. I understand an outside firm was hired as well. And I look at the footprint of the Pink Shell or Outrigger or Diamond Head. It's a pretty good sized footprint. I didn't know, are the sidewalks slippier? Or are they not as much traction? Are there curb issues we need to address from the town? I mean, why are all these ambulances going there? It seems odd to me. If it's twice as many as the nearest address, it seems like an aberration to me. I mean, you must trouble you a bit, right? I mean, would you at least be willing to talk with the fire chief and sort of do some? No one's suggesting that 911 shouldn't respond to the calls. That's not the point. The point is to try to figure out what the issues are and how to resolve them. It seems like, given these fire numbers, one of the first calls I would make, we have a wonderful fire chief here on the island. I would just respectfully encourage you to reach out to the fire department and do some additional investigatory work as to maybe what the cause of some of these runs are. That's all I'm suggesting.
And I hear you, but please understand why I was brought in and why I was hired. I was hired because this council was talking about a nuisance abatement board, and it was clear, as I had said last time, and I didn't want to have to bring it up, that Lani Kai was the catalyst and the target. What I was coming in to do to figure out what they could do within their operations to make sure that, number one, we reduce the use of resources with respect to what could get them into trouble with the nuisance abatement board. I have a very clear focus. I am not here. Now, the town council, if you all would like to bring in, I mean, I think it would be important for you to do. If you want to understand if you're having a problem with your sidewalks in the front of the Lani Kai, well then, by all means, bring in the fire department to find out if you've got slippery sidewalks in front of the Lani Kai. But a lot of people hang out there in terms of in and around. They hang out on the in that particular area. And again, I will say it again. If I was injured, I had to call 911, and I didn't know where I was as a guest on Port Myers Beach, I would look up and say, I'm near the Lani Kai. And believe me, that's the address they're going to put in.
Can I interject just for a second? Jim? Okay, now, I hear what you're saying, but the understanding was that you're brought in to reduce the risk to the Lani Kai. You seem to be very, like you said, focused on the interpretation that the nuisance abatement board will target the Lani Kai, which has been stated in a way that that's not the purpose of the nuisance abatement board. Looking for risk analysis, and I would say you're really looking for the root cause of what the risk is. Now, when I look at some of the statistics that you pulled up and you talked about, when someone is trespassed, this usually means that they're trying to get someone who is, for some reason, on the property. They don't want on the property because they're belligerent or whatever else. Right. So it means it needs, and they can't get them off on their own, and they have security. So it means someone is probably pretty belligerent who does that. Similarly, some of the other calls, domestic violence, all this kind of stuff. To me, doing a risk assessment and say, well, why are these things happening? How many of these are due to overconsumption of alcohol, either alcohol consumed off the premises or served on the premises? And then what the risk model that I would look at is if that is a problem, if the overconsumption is a problem, if that's because of over-serving, then they should have policy changes. If it's because people who are inebriated coming onto the property, that they can manage that risk by changing that situation. Not necessarily coming here and try to convince us that the statistics don't mean what they say. The other thing is the area check. The area, they go there for a reason. The sheriff goes to the area, that place for a reason. It's safe to assume that if they didn't do all these area checks, that the crime would be higher, because that is a very effective deterrent to go into a property when the sheriff is there. I'm going to just saying, when you're talking about looking at risk, saying we're looking at the risk being the potential of the formation of a nuisance abatement board, as opposed to the risk to the safety of the clientele, the citizenry, and the business of Atlantic.
Okay, so you all invited me to come back to share with you what I'm doing. Number one, my contractual relationship with Alani Kai is my contractual relationship with Alani Kai, and what I advise them beyond the scope of trying to analyze what was your concern were the number of calls. So I'm here to tell you that when you drill down into the CAD files and you look at it, it is not what you thought it was. It is not as severe as what you thought it was. It is a much different picture than what I heard, and I heard the outrage about how abusive they were of the resources of the town. It's just simply not the case. Are there problems? Yes. But I saw several articles where there were murders in other locations, or there were stabbings in other locations, and nobody's jumping up and down on those as well. I mean, crime happens in every community, and it's unfortunate. But I watched your sheriff come here and tell you that he's doing a better job, and I believe he is. I believe with the changes and the recommendations that I will be making to the Lani Kai, and they implement them, that it's going to reduce a significant number of calls, which should be your concern because you are the stewards of the taxpayer dollars, and you want to make sure that there isn't a disproportionate use of resources with one particular business. And that is what I believe the issue was, is what I heard everybody saying. What I'm saying to you is the changes that we're going to request that they make are going to reduce those people that are drinking at another location, coming in and creating a disturbance because they all are already intoxicated. The one thing I found is their bartenders are trained significantly. They know exactly what they're doing. Everybody's wearing a bracelet. They know when to cut them off. And I do not believe any business, whether it's the Pink Shell or the Lani Kai or the Mermaid or whoever, whatever the business, creates an environment which is going to create risk so that they lose their business. They are doing everything that they can. Their people need to be trained better on certain circumstances, because if you have a culture of philosophy, call the sheriff, maybe there's other ways to handle it. So they need greater training, perhaps their security in particular, how to de-escalate situations and get people to move off the property so that they don't have to call the sheriff. That's what the security consultant was all about. So those are the things that those are the types of things that we're going to do to reduce resources that were going to be used in the city. That was my goal. You think they had too many calls? I'm trying to show you that they don't have as many as you think, number one. Number two, we're going to be implementing changes so that they can control their environment more. That's what they're guilty of, letting too many people on the property who were probably already intoxicated and came on the Lani Kai to create trouble. So we're going to make sure that they control access to the property and that everybody, before they enter the Lani Kai, is basically observed.
Two just points on what you said. One is that now if one of your risk management suggestions is going to be to have the private security at the Lani Kai take a more active role and be hesitant to call the sheriff, that to me would be a greater liability.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said. And by the way, I hear you, but with all due respect, they hired me to advise them. They can take the advice. They don't have to take the advice. I have nearly 40 years of experience. I know what I'm doing. And I've worked with a lot of businesses in helping them reduce their risk. My goal with you here today was to let you know that I did the analysis of the calls. It's not what you think it is. It's pretty on point in what the sheriff said in terms of a lot of the calls, people are hanging up. We didn't even pull.
I'm
Yeah.
going
All
to
right,
interrupt
we're
because I'm...
repeating
I'm-
ourselves now.
I'm the one who kind of asked a question and got you off track. I am taking notes on what your recommendations are, and I've only gotten one so far. Your first recommendation was to reduce access to the property. What is your second recommendation?
Well, and keep in mind, I'm not sharing all the recommendations with you. It's their business model, it's proprietary. I'm here as a courtesy to let you know that the Lani Kai has been a good corporate citizen, as you know, is very generous to this community, wants to be a partner with the city, and is going to do everything in their power to reduce the resources that they use for the town because you all thought it was probably too much. I think they've told you that they're doing their fobs, they're going to be restricting access, they're going to be improving the training of their staff. And that's going to be huge. A lot of what I've done throughout my career is advise businesses, your first customer is your employee. You treat your employees the way you want your customers to be treated, you're going to be in pretty darn good shape. So it's a culture shift, right? So it's just about coming in like, you know, any other consultant would do and just kind of giving a fresh eye on things that you can do things differently to try to change what's going on. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm not going to be in a position to share with you every detail because it's not appropriate for me to do that.
Ellen,
But for the vast majority of calls, which were over 120 for disturbance and trespass, you're going to see a significant reduction there when they limit the access. And the only way to enter is going to be through the breezeway, and you're going to have a stationed kind of concierge security person there who's going to be greeting everybody who's coming into the property. That's going to be huge.
Ellen, we talked yesterday or this week with the opening of the Outreach Center, and one of the captains from the Sheriff's Office, and he said that you guys have hired an outside security expert. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what their
No.
mission?
That's
You won't share that
that's
with
not,
us?
it's not my place to do that. Look, at the end of the day, and I'm here as a courtesy to kind of let you know what we found out. You all know the Lani Kai better than I do if you've been here and you've been on the island a long time. I've gotten to know them. I've gotten to know the island a little bit. I've spent some nights here. I enjoy it. It's a fun place to come. But I will tell you, you know, I mean, drinking is definitely something that's done on the island quite a bit. It's something that the vice mayor brought up when she says if the nuisance abatement board can't address drinking, then what are we doing here? So it's where people come to have fun, they relax, they sit on the beach, they drink, they enjoy themselves. I'm not here, I'm not in a position to share with you proprietary
So
information on security. I'm not going to do that.
Nobody's interested in proprietary information. I thought this was going to be a dialogue about actions that the Lani Kai was taking to eliminate some of the challenges. I thought you were hired because there was a tragic murder at that facility. So now it's
Absolutely not. To do, this
Well,
has
that's good to
absolutely
know.
nothing to
All right.
do with the murder, because you all were discussing nuisance abatement long before that. Long before that.
You said you were here to discuss the numbers and some of the disproportionate uses of town resource. The only things I ever talked about was the fire department numbers, and you've not even talked to the fire chief yet. So I'm just confused. So you're here as a defense attorney to sort of dispute these numbers as opposed to discuss sort of the next steps to making things better? I mean, because I thought that's what this dialogue was about. 'cause
I think
we
I've
want-
made,
we want
I
things to get
honestly
better.
think I've made myself clear. I think you're twisting things, and I think you're not hearing me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
At the end of the
Go ahead
day,
again. Yeah.
at the end of the day, numbers that you all think are outrageous are not the real numbers. That's number one. That's number one. Number two, the vast majority of calls, when we do the analysis, we are going to implement. I'm going to say this again, because I think I've been pretty upfront and honest in telling you what I can share with you, what I won't share with you, and that is that when you look at what's happening at the location, it is open. It's available. That's what they wanted. They were doing it like in the 70s and the 80s. Come, have fun, party at the Lani Kai. Unfortunately, they recognize that times have changed and that sometimes people take advantage of an operation like that, so they're going to limit access to the property by creating basically trying to create one entranceway, okay? It's standard in most industries. You want to protect yourself? Look, when I was a kid growing up in South Florida, every day after school I got to go to my elementary school and play on the playground and play paddleball and hang out with my friends. My kids went to elementary school, there were fences. We weren't allowed to play anymore because of liability issues. Now, because of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, we have armed security in every school in the state of Florida. Times have changed. And the Lani Kai is prepared to move forward and change with it. They still want to be fun, they still want to be affordable, but they're going to make sure that the people coming on their property are there to be good patrons of the property and not cause trouble. How you do that is you control access. This is standard with most businesses. You control access, which is why people have buzzers on doors and they make sure that there aren't problems. And they're going to train their staff better. It's a weakness. Train your staff better. It's true for anybody. The more your staff knows, the more they understand, the better off that they're going to be. There are several other changes that they are probably willing to make that we've recommended, and we're going to work through that. But I came here today to assure you, number one, that the numbers aren't what you think they are. Number two, that they are implementing changes to address those issues where they can reduce the risk and they can reduce use of town resources.
And you
Don't know
have
what
done
else
that,
you-
and you
Pardon?
have done that, Counselor. You have done it several times now.
Thank you.
I've got the picture, and I think we all have the picture. So let's see if we can't wrap it up here. If you have anything you'd like to say in closing or anything, but
I am happy to answer any questions that I have not already answered.
are there any final questions for the
Mayor, if I
council?
may, just real quick, we won't rehash it. I agree with the Vice Mayor. I'm still baffled at some of the numbers that you're using. I'm confused. I think you're using some of the numbers to fit the narrative that you're trying to portray. Police traffic stops, how is that a call? I'm not sure how you're differentiating between what is an actual call and what is a random stop in front of an address. I'm just putting it out there. We don't, as the mayor said, I don't want to keep rehashing it. And I'm really curious to find out what it is that you've found in your analysis that has preempted you to make suggestions to a property that every other property on the island has been automatically doing since the day they opened their doors. What is it that took 40 years to have you come out, analyze what has happened, make suggestions to, as you said, key fobs? Pink Shells has been doing that forever. Properly training staff. Every hotel that I know of on the island properly does that. Reduce access to the property. All of these things that you've mentioned, other properties are already doing. So I'm still waiting to hear what it is that you've found in your analysis that you've given them something that maybe somebody else isn't doing to properly reduce the risk.
So number one, let me clarify the call issue. That's how the sheriff's office refers to it, calls. These are reports. These are CAD files. I think I've said that. These are CAD files. Whether it's a call that came from the Lani Kai, from somebody who's outside the Lani Kai, or just simply when the police arrived for whatever reason they did a report. These are reports. So let's take the word call out there, okay? Because call, report are interchangeable in a sense where when a report is written, the indication is there was a problem at the Lani Kai. I don't care if it was a call or the sheriff's office just happened to show up. That is showing that the police had to engage in an incident at the Lani Kai. What I'm telling you is that there were 868, of which the vast majority had nothing to do with the Lani Kai. They just attributed the address to an incident occurred in and around. With respect to your second issue, their business model is their business model, and that's not for any of us to judge unless it becomes a problem for them. They have been known in this community, it was Mr. C's desire, Conaderis' desire, to be affordable, open, and a friendly environment where people could come and have fun. And they do. But unfortunately, as you all know, and I did describe in great detail, times have changed. People have taken advantage of that environment. We can no longer do that. For the same reason that my 6-year-old has to go to school with armed security versus the fact that I was able to go to school and play outside and go back to the school and nobody stopped me.
Right, we're repeating ourselves again.
I get it, but I'm being asked the same question, and Mr. Mayor, I'm answering it.
I know you are. I know you are.
Here's what I'm going to close with, okay? I want to
you.
thank you all for the opportunity. I came here as a courtesy. They are excellent corporate citizens, and they want to continue to be. I think that y'all kind of need to give them a break, and I guess I'm going to leave with this. I think the nuisance abatement is pretty, in my opinion, in reviewing all of this and kind of talking to a lot of the citizens and a lot of the other hotels who are concerned about it as well, it's a little heavy-handed for a community where, in my opinion, everybody seems to know everyone. Everybody in this, it's a very friendly town, and everybody seems to know everyone. And I think we all need to figure out how to work together and figure out how to fix problems and stop maybe a little less finger pointing. But I'm going to leave it with that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Thanks for coming out and sharing with us your progress with the establishment, and we appreciate your efforts and also those of the hotel themselves. Thank you again. Okay, the next item on the agenda, the consent agenda. We have two items on there. One, both of these we've discussed at the M&P meeting. One is the disposition of surplus items, and the other is the fleet purchase, which is the trade-in and purchase of the pallet truck.
I'd move to approve the consent agenda.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved, seconded. Any discussion? Any objection? The motion passes unanimously. Okay. Now we go on to the public hearings portion of the meeting. And the first item is item A, which is Resolution 20-35, setting the proposed millage rate for fiscal year 2021. This is a resolution, approved Resolution 2035, setting the proposed operating ad valorem rate for tax year 2020 and 2021, and set the second public hearing to consider the final millage rate of .9500 mils and adopt the budget fiscal year 2020-2021 on September 21st, 2020 at 5:01 p.m. It's been suggested that we entertain a motion to table this item and bring it back after we have the discussion on the capital budget hearing.
I have no objection to tabling. Do we need to actually do a motion, John?
Yes,
I'll move to table this until after we deal with the budget item.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, that takes us into item B, which is the Resolution 20-36, preliminary fiscal year 2021 operating and capital budget hearing number 1. This is to approve Resolution 20-36, adopting the preliminary town operating budget, capital budget, and fee schedule for fiscal year 2020 and 2021, finding that it is consistent with the requirements of the town comprehensive plan, and setting the final budget hearing for September 21, 2020 at 5:01 p.m.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
for the record, can I read the title of the resolution?
Yes, sir.
Resolution number 20-36, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach adopting the preliminary budget for the fiscal year 2020-2021, commencing October 1st, 2020, and ending September 30th, 2021, and providing for an effective date.
I will discuss the resolution. Budget. Accept the resolution, yes. Okay, we'll open it up to the council here and the manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, just wanted to begin by saying this is the fourth time, this will be the fourth time the five of us and staff have talked about the 2021 budget. There'll be potentially one more hearing on the 21st. That was already read into the record. I thank all of you who have spent time with me and have asked very thoughtful questions about the proposed budget. And I well understand that you may have some more this evening. I also would like to thank all the staff, the department directors, and in particular our finance staff who worked very hard to put these documents together for you and the public. And there are a couple of highlights I'd just like to reiterate. I'm sure you know them, but just for anyone who might be listening. As you know that when we initially discussed the budget, I told the council that from an operating standpoint that we can continue to fund the current level of services at .87. this council took the position of the prior council of increasing the budget by .08 to begin a community improvement, community redevelopment, community initiative to redo certain town assets, primarily 3 of them, Times Square, Bayside Park, and the Bay Oaks Recreational Campus. And therefore, that brought us to a millage rate of .95, and that's where we sit today. Proposed general fund budget from property taxes and fees is $9.2 million. The general fund millage will generate 3.389, call $3.390 million, and that's assuming a 96% collection rate, which is what we utilize because people take advantage of the discount by their mortgage company when they're paying their property taxes and pay it early. Just a couple of policy issues. We are following up on the decision not to utilize gas taxes going forward to supplement anything other than road projects. It's previously been used to pay for the road rehabilitation aspects of our capital project in stormwater and water projects, and that won't be done prospectively. It's not contemplated in the current year's budget. The town is, due to your consideration of water and wastewater fee adjustments, that the town will no longer be supplementing stormwater maintenance, so the stormwater utility fee will be paying for its own maintenance. I will tell you that this year, due to a variety of issues from COVID to the untimely death of an employee to a grant that we received, a deferment of a loan payment, we have not had to borrow money from the general fund to pay for stormwater maintenance in fiscal year 20. Although the council did put a loan in place because we thought we may have to utilize that money for stormwater maintenance, we did not.
Just on that point, Roger, just to be clear, so is there any outstanding loans from the general fund to the stormwater utility?
Well, my understanding there wasn't a request to go prospective before last fiscal year. It stopped in October of 19, use of general fund money for maintenance. We were concerned that that transition would need to be backstopped. The council last year voted to say, okay, let's set aside 300 and change for maintenance if you need it, if the stormwater utility fund can't absorb the maintenance on its own. Council agreed to do that as part of last year's budget. That's how we perform. We're basically at the end of this fiscal year. And as it sits right now, based on the information I received from our finance director and our utility director, we have not had to dip into that $300,000 that we had set aside in case it was needed. Of course, that will be verified once the fiscal year closes by our external auditor. And if in fact they determine that there was an over expenditure for stormwater maintenance that would require that money, then we'll identify it. We'll show it as a due to on our books that the utility owes the general fund a certain amount of money. Right now, we're anticipating that to be zero.
So therefore, if they didn't utilize it or have a need for it, it would revert back to the general fund. Is that correct?
It's part of the unfunded balance. That's correct, sir.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay, I guess the last thing I just wanted to mention before I open up to council questions is that the town has robust reserves for a variety of things that could come up as sort of quote-unquote emergencies or unanticipated types of expenses. We have $1.3 million in just regular capital for renewal and replacement. And then, of course, we're proceeding, at least at this point, with the $10 million loan for the big 3 projects that I mentioned earlier.
Questions of the manager? Comments?
A couple clarifying questions, Mr. Mayor. So just for the public that's watching, Roger, the mill rate, which is effectively the tax rate for the town, is staying the same as it was last year. Is that fair?
That's exactly correct.
And when the council votes on the budget, will the storm and water rate adjustments / increases, part of that, will they be rolled into the budget vote? Will they be
The
separate?
second budget hearing, there'll be a revenue of rate fee resolutions. You'll have a third and fourth item on the 21st that go along with these two items. But you'll be setting the revenue rates match what's been estimated by the finance department and departments in terms of revenue for next fiscal year.
It'll be a separate vote from the budget then for the water and stormwater rate adjustments.
You've already voted for the increases. You would, I bet, in essence, be undoing them if you would, for all intents and purposes.
Was my question. So those have been formally already approved, or will they be part of the budget process next
They've
meeting?
been approved, but you can undo them if you wish.
It's not my intention to do that, but that's not part of the budget vote then. Those have already been formally approved then, unless we decide to do otherwise. Is that fair?
Well, the way we do utility rates is we offer the public the ability to come in and speak to the council about those rate adjustments. That public hearing on that resolution will be on the 21st.
That would be the public's opportunity if they had any particular concern.
Sir.
Raise those objections. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
The questions, comments, gripes?
I guess I have a comment. We received some time ago this notebook, and I wasn't informed that there was going to be another notebook in my mailbox.
Right.
So I marked everything to ask in this notebook, and when I try to go through and find it in this notebook, there's a lot of pages that aren't there that weren't in this notebook.
Well, we can follow your questions from either a notebook you're more comfortable working with.
Well, I guess just for future reference, let us know that there's a notebook to be picked up.
Okay.
And I'm curious as to why you would leave out things that were in the other notebook. For example, there's a page about personnel things. It doesn't have a page number. Right after the art town table, well, table organization, I don't see that in this one either.
All right, the one that you received today is the budget reports from the town's budget system, more than spreadsheets and other types of reports. Because we went through those previously, I guess the finance director didn't include them this time. They're all on the table for discussion. So if you have a question, just tell us from the old book, from the new book, and we'll address it.
I guess I was just making a comment, and that comment is that if it was part of the budget before, it seems like it should be part of the budget now, and it would be easier when we get these updates if the same pages are there to go through and make comparisons. So again, it's a comment, not a question.
Madam Vice Mayor, what we'll try to do is, if we have a substitution for a page in the future, we'll just give you the substituted page. That way, you'll have one book and it will stay stagnant, and if you get a substitute page, cross out the old page 32 and put the new page 32 in. Your point's well taken.
I guess one thing I'd like to state for the record, in addition, because we have 3 new council members here, is that in the last budget, Mr. Lang and I had a strong disagreement about a grant that we had been receiving. And he elected not to apply for the grant anymore because he felt like it cost more for the town to go through the paperwork for the grant and to what it was worth. I just want to say for the record here today that I was promised that that money would remain in our budget, that even though we don't get the grant, that that money would be there, and it's for the after-school programs. I'd just like you to know, the 3 new members, that that promise was made to me in the past, and for this budget and future budgets, the town has promised that that money will be there for those after-school programs. I don't want to see them get cut someday because the grant isn't there anymore. You're all following my drift. I'm just saying this for your education and
And it is included.
Yes, I noticed it was, or I would have,
And
I
just,
would have jumped up and down.
just for the record, just to put your comments in context, it's a
Yes.
$23,000 plus or minus grant, so.
Exactly.
That's why Mr. Lang made the comment that a federal grant of that size requires a lot of paperwork, and felt that, once he did it through the grant, the value of the grant was greatly diminished. The service is
The
needed.
important part to me is that the promise was made that we would keep funding those projects.
No one is questioning the need for the service.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any particulars?
A quick question. I noticed that in the two different personnel control charts, that the numbers are going back even to years ago. The reason why the total number of personnel in 2016, 2017 is different on the two.
Hey, Joe and Bill, in the new book.
On the new one, it's page 8. Old one, it's a single page. Like page 8, it says like in the fiscal year 16, 17, 65 and a half. In the old book, it was 60.
I'll have to do a side-by-side comparison, and we'll send you an email to respond to that specifically. I might be guessing that on one report includes the council, and one report does not. It still doesn't exactly square up those two numbers, but we'll take a look at it and see if we'll highlight the differences. Yeah.
Just a thought. I'm Robert Lang, your finance director. You're talking about this particular schedule. You're talking about a report on positions by FTE, so you can have one full-time equivalent that you're paying for at $50,000, and if one of the directors says to the manager, talks him into hiring 4 or 5 part-timers and not going over the capital, over the expenditure horizon, the budget, dollar-wise, how to do that. So, and you go back and recount some of these things. We find that sometimes that part-time person is not there and replaced with a full-time person, the FTE will change. So those are very volatile numbers, even though the dollar amount always stays the same.
So did you do some kind of audit for all the numbers going
No,
back?
actually, I just
4
went
years?
back and tried to pull the files that we had at that time. I didn't go back and audit any of the previous. It shows that there's continuous steady use of the same number of personnel all along. I'm not sure what exactly changed for that particular year in 16, 17. That's when I first got here. It was already done. My predecessors may have used a little bit different methodology, but I use the methodology that I'm used to. Putting numbers is what I have on file at this time.
The number for 2021 is different between the two notebooks as well.
In 2 books.
2 notebooks.
Yeah,
The first notebook I got showed a total number of employees at 74.25, and I tried to add it up numerous times, and it never would add up, and the new notebook shows 71.
That is an issue that you deal with when you deal with FTEs and try to count the number of people that you actually have. Because at one point, if you have a vacancy and that vacancy is 1, and somebody says, well, I need really 2 part-timers instead of 1, if they come back and give me an edit on those things, I'll change it, but it doesn't change the bottom line. It changes the number of people. So there's an issue when you're dealing with FTEs compared to actual bodies that are in the workforce.
Yes, I just don't understand why it would change between the 2 notebooks.
Because
Well,
When we-
let's do this. We will issue a report reconciling those 2 pages to clarify what the differences were and what the official count is. I think the easier way to do that is to separate the full-time positions on a report, part-time positions on a report, because there are certain part-time positions that are 30 hours a week, we have some that are 20 hours a week, and how those are listed as a full-time equivalent can skew these numbers. So we'll go through that and reconcile it to the best of our ability.
but it is reconciled.
We'll re-reconcile it.
I'm just trying to say that the information is there. At the time of the workshop, we had data that was reflected people's positions. We try to split people up. If somebody's being charged to 2 different work centers, pick a director that's been charged of 2 areas, one full person, or is that 2 half-times? So how you read it. You have a full-time person. So when you start counting these things, when we give you the first report, it's because it's a work document at a workshop to go over. That's the data we have, and then we tweak it from there to see if we got everything tied down exactly. So, yeah, there are differences in the FTEs, but when you look at the page, with these things going back and forth, there is a lot of edits that go on. Comply and give you, Vice Mayor, as you asked once before on transparency. If you look at page 12, the number count for full-time positions and part-time positions are there, and you can see the numbers, and if you divide them by, on the part-time, 50%, you'll see that those tie back to the 71 on the front
But there's
sheet.
no harm going back and doing a reconciliation and highlighting any differences between the two so the council can see them very easily.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone?
Mr. Mayor, I do want to address one point. At our, I believe it was at our last meeting, Councilor Adderholt asked me utilizing the reserves for perhaps contracting for additional police officers. And I think I answered his question that it would potentially be an issue of having to, if you kept going forward, you would have to pay for them going forward, and you would have to replace the reserves. And that is a generally true statement. However, to the extent that we have any surplus reserves, you could make that decision not to replenish it. And I don't know if I made that 100% clear when we last talked about it.
I appreciate that clarification. I was just talking about the possibility of using the reserves as we were just discussing the broader issue of community policing. Of course, a lot of that depends on how you define surplus reserves. I mean, that's a policy decision for both the council and for the
Right, I
town.
just want to make it clear, we have money in reserves that I would say to you would absolutely have to replenish. We have some money in reserves that could be discretionary whether you want to replenish. Obviously, from our perspective, maintaining that cash balance for any and all contingencies is a good thing, and I would encourage you to replenish it, but you don't necessarily have to if you didn't want to.
States and municipalities across the country are trying to distinguish what that critical reserve is versus excess reserves. And it's a fair policy question and discussion. And I don't know that I have the answer for it, but certainly a good thing to discuss.
I just wanted to make sure if I wasn't clear enough that I made that point clearer.
Clarification. Anybody else? Bill? All good? Okay. Well, then we'll go back to,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, sir.
it is a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll open it up to the public. Anybody wish to comment? No request. Anyone else wishes to comment? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And we'll have the final hearing on September 21st, 2020 at 5:01 p.m.
At this point, it would be appropriate to table resolution number 2035 and take back up
Tabled that one already.
36.
Okay. Okay, is there a motion to table resolution -20-36?
I'll move to table 20-36,
Okay.
take back up 20-35.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any objection? The motion carries unanimously. Okay, now we'll go back to resolution 20-35, setting the proposed millage rate for fiscal year 2021.
And because of the peculiarities of state law, generally what we do is we actually read the entirety of this resolution into the record because it says the magic words that the statute requires, that we state the millage, the rolled back, and the percentage, and then prior to adoption, the motion would be you're moving to adopt this resolution and set the millage in order to be able to cover the soon-to-be adopted proposed budget. If with your permission.
Right ahead.
Resolution number 20-35, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach adopting the proposed ad valorem millage rate for the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida for fiscal year 2020-2021, commencing October 1, 2020 and ending September 30th, 2021, for the purpose of providing sufficient funds for the general fund, establishing the date, time, and place for a final hearing to adopt the final operating ad valorem millage rate for fiscal year 2020-2021 and providing an effective date. Whereas Florida statutes provide that municipalities shall have the governmental, corporate, and proprietary powers to enable them to conduct municipal government, perform municipal functions, render municipal service, and exercise any power for municipal purposes except when expressly prohibited by law. And whereas Article 10 of the Town Charter of the Town of Fort Myers Beach empowers the town to adopt, amend, or repeal such ordinance and resolutions as may be required for the proper governing of the town. And whereas the 2020 tax assessment roll for the town has been prepared, equalized, and certified, showing a total taxable value of real and personal property in the amount of $3,716,753,191. And whereas Section 200-065 requires rollback data be presented in aggregate for the town. And whereas Section 200-065 Florida statute establishes the method of determining and levying an ad valorem millage rate and adopting a budget for all taxing authorities in the state of Florida. And whereas following proper notice on September 10th, 2020, the Town Council held the required public hearing to consider any adjustments to the tentative millage rate adopted on June 18th, 2020, and following public input, adopted the proposed ad valorem budget for fiscal year 2020-2021. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved by the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach as follows. Section 1, the above recitals are true and correct and incorporated herein by this reference. Section 2, the Town Council does hereby adopt the proposed operating ad valorem millage rate for fiscal year 2020-21 at 0.9500 mils, which is 0.9500 for each $1,000 of assessed valuation. The current year rolled back rate is 0.9151 mils. The proposed operating millage rate is 3.51% greater than the rolled back rate. In Section 3, a public meeting and hearing will be held on September 21st, 2020 at 5:01 p.m. at the Town Hall of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, located at 2525 Estero Boulevard, Fort Myers Beach, Florida, to consider and adopt the final millage rate for fiscal year 2020-2021. And then Section 4 is the effective date, which is adoption of this resolution.
Thank you very much. Okay, it's a public hearing, so we'll open it up to public comment. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this? Hearing and seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 20-35 setting the proposed operating and ad valorem rate for tax year 2021 and set public hearing to consider the final millage rate of 0.9500 mils and adopt the budget for fiscal year 2020-2021, September 21st, 2020 at 5:01 p.m. A motion to approve that resolution.
We're just moving this to the second hearing. We're not actually setting the proposed rate, right,
Well,
John?
Exactly.
It's the first step in which the next hearing will be the final step. It is required by state law for you to adopt this resolution, adopting what is called in state statute the proposed millage rate, and then the next public hearing will be the final millage rate.
Okay, I'll move to approve Resolution 20-35 for the millage rate and to set it for its second hearing on September 21st, 2020 at 5:01 p.m. I think he read all of it.
Well, no, that the millage rate is set at the rate specified to cover the proposed budget.
What he said.
Okay, is there a second for that? Second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? John, would you, while we're talking about it, just for the edification of the people at home and those present here today, just give a brief explanation again of the rollback rate for everyone?
Yes, it's the equivalent of last year's millage rate in this year's numbers based upon the total valuation of the assessed value as determined by the property appraiser. Mr.
It's the same amount of, it's a rate to generate the same amount of revenue as last year, which basically discounts any roll growth from year to year, increased property values.
Very good.
And that's why we read the 3.51% above.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Just want everybody to know that. Okay, any further discussion? Any objection to the motion? It carries unanimously. We'll take that up again on the 21st. Okay, item C is
B, or back to B.
back to B. We just, yeah, okay.
Take that off the table.
Okay, take it off the table. Okay, is there a resolution to approve, is there a motion to approve Resolution 20-36, adopting the preliminary town operating budget, capital budget, and fee schedule for fiscal year 2020, 2021, finding that it is consistent with the requirements of the town comprehensive plan, and setting the final budget hearing for September 21st, 2020 at 5:01 p.m. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any objection?
We had the public hearing already, yes.
Yes, we did. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the third public hearing is item C, which is the second and final public hearing for ordinance 20-12, state of emergency and disaster planning. Ordinance 20-12, state of emergency and disaster planning, an ordinance of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, adopting a new Article 2 of Chapter 12 of the Code of Ordinances of the town of Fort Myers Beach entitled Emergency Management and Disaster Planning, and repealing existing Article 2, 3, and 4 of Chapter 12 of the Code of Ordinances of the town of Fort Myers Beach entitled Emergency Management and Disaster Planning, access to Emergency Preparedness Fund, and local emergency procedures, providing for severability, codification, Scrivener's errors, conflicts of law, and providing an effective date.
Mr. Mayor, before opening the public hearing, I do have the notice of publication indicating that this has been published and is therefore properly before you for second reading and adoption.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open this to public comment. Anyone who wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion from the council to approve this ordinance?
I'll move to approve ordinance 20-12.
Okay, it's been moved. For a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
Just one thing, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if it's a huge issue, but on packet page 40, top of the page, A, it just looks like there's forgot an E on the in for town, reduction of vulnerability of the residents of the town to damage.
Yes, we'll make sure that that gets.
Typo?
Just a typo, yeah.
Okay. My. Okay. All right. Anything else? Further discussion? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously.
Roll call.
Oh, excuse me, roll call. Councilman Allers.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hasselfross.
Yes.
Yes.
Councilman Adderholt. Councilman Veach.
Aye.
Mayor Murphy, aye. Okay. The motion and ordinance passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to the administrative agenda. And item A, and there is Resolution 20-34, which is an item repealing Resolution 1413, the written investment policy. Resolution 20-34 repealing, just read that, Resolution 1413 written investment policy. Town Manager, you want to give us a little background on this one here?
Council, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the state statute on investment policies has basically 17 points. So the 16 points First 16 points lay out what you do if you basically have an active investment policy and what's required to do those. Point 17 says if you invest your money in type A and type B investments, you don't have to follow points 1 through 16. That is how the town has been investing its money. That's how the town does invest its money. And therefore, having a written investment policy that that tracks back through 1 through 16, frankly, is not needed and creates some potential risk in and of itself for the town. So the finance staff, the director, the assistant director, and our CPA all recommend that we put this policy aside until such time as the town wishes to have a active investment policy. By that I mean we would have a investment committee, we would have people who would be meeting regularly to review our investments, to make adjustments to our investment portfolio, and a whole variety of things that you would or probably are doing if you have your own personal investment policy. Because we put our money in a government pool or in CDs, that's not necessary, and we don't do that now, and that's all covered under Section 17. Therefore, having this policy is not needed until such time that we do have an active policy. It is a good policy, it's just not applicable right now, and causes some potential risks. And as such, it's our recommendation that you set it aside till such time as you make a conscious decision as a council that you want to engage in that type of active investing and put all the measures in place to implement that, including an investment policy.
Did I? Just one quick question. I heard you right, Roger, that you said that our auditors, the CPAs, recommended that we set this aside for now?
I said our finance director, our assistant director, and our internal CPA.
Oh, your internal, not our auditors.
That's correct. Our external auditors are going to say that if we have an investment policy, we have to be doing certain things.
Yes.
And that is where the potential risk is, because we're having to do a whole series of things that we don't do. We have no reason to be doing other than to comply with a policy that we're not actually implementing.
I'll just for the council's edification, as you know, I'm the liaison to the audit committee, and the audit committee voted unanimously to this resolution in place. Just let that be known to you in questions.
We just, in the interest of time, make a motion that we refer this back to the audit committee for their consideration.
Well, they've already considered it. They voted unanimously to.
Yeah. Here's my
Again?
Here's my concern, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, is that this went before the audit committee. Some of the key staff members were not at the audit committee meeting. The audit committee votes unanimously to maintain this policy. It seems like there ought to be some kind of synergy, if you will, between the audit committee and the town manager and staff with respect to moving forward together on this. Clearly, there's a failure to communicate on some front on this. I think it would be helpful to have the audit committee take another look at it, have the town have their entire staff before them that's germane to this particular issue, work together with the audit committee. I'm uncomfortable with this resolution, particularly with a 5-0 vote from the audit committee to retain it. I think there's good arguments on both sides, but I think there needs to be a colloquy between the audit committee and the town staff to work through this together, then come back to the council with a recommendation that I think everybody could live with.
Does anybody else feel the same way?
I could go along with that. I watched the audit committee meeting this afternoon, and I think that despite the fact that Andreas was present, they felt uncomfortable undoing something that they had spent a lot of time working on.
Yes.
And I such great respect for the members of the audit committee that I would hesitate to vote for something tonight. I might vote for it in the future. There's no rush to do this, so I'd like to
We'll see if they're willing to have a special meeting and call them, come back in, and we'll take another stab at educating
well, I don't know
them.
that you have to have a special meeting. That's part of the problem the last time. Not everybody got notice of the meeting. Not everybody felt they had a complete packet. Mr. Lang wasn't present. Not blaming anybody in particular, but there were a lot of different circumstances that entered into their discomfort. And
Well, we'll talk, if it's okay, we'll talk with the chairperson and seek his guidance in terms of how he would like to conduct that meeting. And I would like to get this addressed sooner than later, to be honest, but we'll work with the chairperson of the committee and see what they're comfortable with.
Everybody all right with that?
yeah, and I guess one thing I would say is that it seems that the problem that keeps coming about is that there's a training requirement that we haven't been doing because we really don't need to because of our type of investments, and that keeps getting mentioned in the audit.
Right, so,
So are there any other reasons that this is causing us problems besides that continuing education requirement?
well, I think that's the primary one, to be honest. You know, from our standpoint, it's not a matter that we don't want the staff to be getting training.
Right.
We rather be, although that being said, we rather than being trained in things they actually use versus
Right.
things they don't use.
Not arguing that.
But,
My question
but to
was,
the
are
ex-
there other things besides the training requirement that are causing problems with this?
Well, I would say that's the principal thing.
Okay, so we'll, see.
Is there like, I mean, are there time-consuming procedures that you have to go through every year, aside from the training, to keep this?
Yeah, one person at least has to go through that 8 hours of training a year, and then the issue is that, like in the past, we had a person go through the training, and then they left the town, and then we got caught in the exact quagmire that the vice mayor mentioned, that person had left, and we'd have time to get someone else trained
Beside
in the window.
But
So-
beside the training?
No, it's just, I'm trying to see how I can best describe this. It's just, I want to be very clear, the policy is an excellent policy, but only if we're doing something that we're not currently doing and haven't done. And frankly, I don't know that this council and the prior council would really want us to embark into that type of investing, so.
Just arguing that, because, you said there's all this training, and I understand a lot of that training is going to something that no one is doing. But are there other activities that you do on an annual basis because this policy is there, even though you're not using it to take your staff time?
The only other thing that we have to do that I'm aware of is we have to show the auditors that our investments are in conformance with Section 17 and not Sections 1 through 16. But,
Probably have to do anyway, right?
well, we do that as an explanation of what we're doing and how we're doing it, but if it's partially being driven by the fact that we have a policy.
okay.
Can I
Go ahead,
just one statement, Mr. Mayor? The audit report was provided to the council. The auditors themselves said, comment about this item, and exactly that. If you didn't have an investment policy, this issue's not be a concern because you are complying with state law. The audit committee agreed to it at that time. I'm not sure why they changed at this time. I think when it was presented to you all as a body back in May, same concurrence was considered when the auditors were made that decision, and we're just trying to bring it forward to take that issue completely off the table.
We'll try again.
And the other thing with the investments, it's an investment type of training, and the FGFOA, which is the Florida Government Finance Officers Association, provides a lot of training classes. I went to them last year in order to comply. The auditors interpreted that the classes offered were not, they didn't concur that they met the task. But the FGFOA said they did. So there's an argument between the two, and I'm not taking sides with them other than to comply with this and to be in position. I took a week class, for seminars through the whole thing, And they said, yes, they are covered. Auditors interpret it differently. So they're the ones rendering the opinion. They're the ones that get the final voice, even though we differ in the determination as to whether the classes I took were sufficient. I only needed 8 hours. I took about 16 hours. Yet it was challenged. And since they're the ones that render the opinion, I have to follow their guidelines. So again, when it comes to education, we have to try to find the courses that are available. And they don't always give you investment-specific courses. But yeah, we've lined up this year to be able to meet that criteria. And that's not an issue as far as education is concerned. The issue has to do with, we got this voluminous system built as if we're investing millions of dollars, putting it out in all kinds of different investment types, giving you a report continuously on the growth and the status and the losses and gains of all those investments. This town can't afford those types of things.
But we can only hope that one day we'll be in that position.
But we're not there now. So
Well, I have one question, Mr. Lang, Robert. This 8 hours of continuing education, this certification, whatever it is, can that be done online?
if the classes are available, yes.
That guy, that employee could just sit at his desk upstairs and do this online and the Wall Street Journal and do whatever else he's doing all day long.
Now, I'm pursuing those types of things also, because I talked to him about webinars, et cetera. And for investment types of items that were qualified, they weren't available for me, so that's why I took the seminar, this 5-day seminar program, of which they said it was all covered, because the accounting associate, auditors and the accountants view all of these classes to see if they qualify for CPEs. They did. But there's an interpretation type, and we're just trying to eliminate that interpretation type of thing. Also, investments that you have today, about $2.5 million, are the same investments we had when I first got here. I would not touch them. I let them just roll. So therefore, we don't really have a program that goes through all of the necessary items needed for a true investment product. And I don't think the town wants to spend those kind of monies. And that's why we come to try to get that burden off of us.
All right.
Your points are well taken, Robert. Were you at the audit committee to convey those concerns to the audit committee?
I was not there. I did note in my communication to everyone, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think somewhere my email missed you, but I had told them, since I was not available, I was out of town, that I would be available by phone. Should they need me, just let me know that, and I would be able to communicate. That communication didn't occur, but I did have, Andre informed me, because he was very knowledgeable on this whole topic.
He did a fine job, I'm told.
He did a fine job. I just think it would be nice for everybody to get together one more time with the audit committee, sit down, work through this together, communicate, respect. They voted 5-0. They had their reasons. I think you've got some good reasons. I think just to respect that process, sit down and see if we could work something out with them.
We're willing to try again,
And
Council.
then bring it to the council at that point.
Can you provide some additional insight? Because I think it's pretty clear from what we've heard that with the amount of money we have invested, that we don't foresee as a town council instructing them to do any more speculative investments than they're doing. And honestly, if we had that much money sitting in our surplus, we'd be lowering our tax rate as opposed to looking for a place to invest it. So I think that's maybe insight we can give to the audit committee, saying that we don't foresee needing those additional investment tools.
I think they're well aware of that.
I had a related question, having listened to the audit committee meeting. There was some discussion of a new statute that requires that the mayor has to be the chair of the audit committee. Was that question referred to you, Mr. Herron?
Yes, and there are actually two separate but related issues. The statute that we're talking about is the Auditor Selection Committee. Under state law, the selection of the outside auditor must take place, I think it's every 4 years. That's the committee that statute refers to. In the creation of our audit committee, you have assigned that responsibility to that committee, but the statute has changed. At least one of you now has to sit on the Auditor Selection Committee. So the manager and I were just recently speaking about this. We have two options: amend the code to modify the existing language to account for that, or simply, when it comes time to go out to RFP for the new Auditor Selection Committee process, we would designate or you all would designate one of yourselves to be part of that auditor selection committee, which is different than your audit committee.
Thank you. I think that was part of what was going on at this meeting. There were many, many questions without answers, and this atmosphere of distrust had kind of grown. So
I'll try to personally be there to see if I
Yeah.
can't help but address some of those issues.
If my presence is of any help, I'll also try to make myself available.
Right. And I'll just say thank you to the members of the Audit Committee for your service. And for those of you gentlemen that are watching this evening, coming back to you, and I'm sure you're thrilled. So anyhow, all right, we'll move on. The next item is final public comment. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment at this point? Hearing none, we'll move on. The next item is town manager's items.
Mr. Mayor, this report may sound redundant to you, and I apologize, but I do have a member of the public who comes to the council periodically and says things that are not quite accurate, so it just behooves me to try to address them. One is that every time the person comes and alleges the QR codes on our signs are not working, we send someone out the next day and they are working. So we will do that again tomorrow. Second thing is that we collect samples of Back Bay and send it to the county, and we pay the county to perform an analysis of those samples. And we specifically do that through the county as a third party for a reason, because if we say they're too good or they're too bad, then the target, people can accuse us of manipulating the numbers one way or the other. This way, we just collect the samples, we give them to the county does the analysis, the county does the report, the data is available from the county. I will tell you that the county did notify us that during the height of COVID, that they were suspending that service for a while, and I don't know that they've reinstated it yet, but as soon as they do, we'll be back in the collecting samples and passing them on to the county and allowing them to continue to run their tests on their laboratory on our Back Bay water quality.
About the issue of the pumping of the water, I think I know what he's referring to, but
So the Lee County's construction contractor will utilize, as part of their dewatering of the construction project, the parts of the stormwater system that are already constructed for the purposes of dewatering, in some cases on some certain streets. And for members of the council who were here on the prior council, you may remember specifically that the county came in and made an urgent request for us to complete the Side Street project on Lazy Way, because when they were getting there, as they went down into Estero, they wanted to use the Lazy Way brand new outfall system for their dewatering. So they were pressing us to have it done by a time certain, which we did, and of course, they weren't there for several months after that, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that all of those projects are permitted and inspected by the Army Corps of Engineers and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So, to the extent that someone who spoke today or anyone else has a concern with them, those projects, that's where they should be expressing that concern with the county and with those permitting agencies.
it's essentially bleeding those areas and pumping it. They have to get rid of the water somewhere. So they pump it back.
Basically what it is groundwater, so that they're taking the water that as it's percolating through the ground, and rather than have to dig through muck, try to dry it, they're sucking out. You'll see those vacuum things with the white things with the little hoses running down the street. They're sucking the water out of the ground to try to dry it. Because if they dig it and it's wet, it's unstable, it can collapse, the sides can collapse and all of that. So, and then that water is, in some cases, not in all cases, but in some cases, is being put through the side street stormwater transmission system, and that system does have filter, but beyond the filter, it does go out to the Back Bay.
Okay, good. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, I had one other point. We received a request from the street performers to reinitiate in Times Square. Unless anyone has any objection to that, I was planning to give them the go-ahead starting this weekend or next weekend, but whatever in the immediate future. Okay, thank you.
Have you singled out the 12 beneficiaries of the license or the
These
permit?
are the existing ones. We'll start with the new beneficiaries next month.
Okay.
Town Attorney.
Similar to the manager, you all may have received some recent communications from a resident regarding alleged inconsistency or between state statute and the emergency order on the requirement of covering when in public. That's founded. The statute that referred to in that email actually was amended, and requires, if you read the entire statute as it currently, that there has to be an intent to use a mask to hide your identity in response to a public health emergency. And there's also been a series of court cases where the legality of such restrictions have been challenged in court here in Florida, and to date, all of the such litigation has been ruled in favor of the upholding the right of local governments to require coverings while out in public. So, any questions regarding those emails? To provide that information to you further.
Thank you. Councilmember items and reports. We'll start with you.
All right, yeah, I have a couple things. Number one is when I was at the unveiling of the outreach program, the one real useful tool I think that outreach center could be is to setting up neighborhood watches. A place to meet. We have someone there who understands how they're set up. I think as part of the picture we're looking at to generally improve safety from the criminal aspects on the island, I think it's an important thing, and I think it's, and also since we don't really know how long the outreach center is going to be open, depending on how the project moves along, but I think time is of the essence to maybe use the PIO to get out the news that now is the time to set up a neighborhood watch and organize maybe through the Public Safety Committee to canvass neighborhoods, or do we have to do to see how well we can implement that in the future. The other thing is tomorrow at 9 and Saturday at 8 down at Carlos Point, volunteers are removing sand spurs. The sand spurs tend to proliferate down there because when they let the weeds grow for the nesting season and they rake them, they're essentially replanting the sand spurs, which like the disturbed soil. So if anybody out there is listening is interested, just come at 9 o'clock to park at Carlos Point tomorrow, or 8 o'clock on Saturday, and bring gloves and buckets and gear and water. And the sand spurs are not only inconvenient for the residents who are supporting that nesting area down there, and we really do appreciate that, but also they're very damaging to the birds themselves. They get tangled up in the sand spurs just like we do. So if anybody wants to, tomorrow and Saturday is a good day to do it.
Sand spurs, you're welcome. That's Carlos Point condominiums.
Right.
Okay.
8350, I think it is, south.
Okay.
I'll just walk out there because my feet are just a natural magnet for them.
That's an image that I'm not going to be able to get out of my mind right now. But,
This is unrelated to the other comments that the town manager just made. Roger, I think it would be helpful at the next, if the agenda is to the next one after that, I think it would be helpful to have a discussion, particularly for the newer members, and quite frankly for the public, particularly with the stormwater rates that are now being adjusted, and many will see an increase as a result of the true costs of the stormwater utility. One of the things we've talked about is the benefits having a functioning and a proper stormwater utility system for the island from a quality water standpoint. No, it's not a panacea, but it does enhance quality water benefits for our island that didn't otherwise exist. think it would be nice to either have someone from the town and the county to talk a little bit about the massive scope of that infrastructure program for the island. It's a massive project. And I think it would also be good to have maybe one of the engineers who's got a background in this area talk a little bit about some of the environmental benefits implementing this stormwater program that's been going on for years for the town, rightfully so. I just think it would be helpful for the public and quite frankly for the council members to have a better sense of the scope of that project and also the positive environmental benefits, particularly as we begin to answer questions about rate adjustments and so forth.
We'll bring in our engineer.
All I have.
Small point. Talked about the restrooms that are supposedly have been available to the public from the Snug Harbor restaurant area.
Yes.
I cruised by there on my scooter, stopped at the stop sign, looked for the sign. Lots of signs. There is a restroom sign. It's farther back than all the others. It's smaller than all the others. It took me like 5 minutes of looking to find it. So if I ask my other council members if, check it out and see if you agree with me that we need a better sign there. I don't want to be the only one asking for it, but it really was hard to see, in my
This is a
opinion.
new sign that was put up in the Bayfront Park.
I can't even tell if it's in Bayfront Park. It's quite a ways back. So I don't know if the restaurant put it up or whether we put it up, but
I'll have a couple of cups of coffee tomorrow morning and write out there and see if I can find it.
yeah.
I know there were like 5 signs in the Snug Harbor area when I was there in the
I'm sitting at
grounds.
the stop sign, so like I'm a pedestrian walking next to Nervous Nellie's looking for a bathroom. And it was not readily apparent that there were any public bathrooms to me. Anyway,
I agree, it's very difficult to find that sign.
thank you, Dan.
But you know it's there, it's fine.
When you're in a hurry, you don't want to be looking for the sign.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm done.
Another image I won't be. Dan?
Just one thing I'd like to talk about. We did have the sheriff's office in here talking about enhanced services the other day at our M&P meeting. Just like to put it out there to see if it's possible or if there's a will from the council to maybe get it added to an agenda item to be able to discuss their proposal for a pilot program for the enhanced services. I think it'd be a great step. Go with the outreach center. Show that we are serious about some of the ordinances and some of the things that right now can't be enforced due to lack of availability, for better terms. Get out there.
Very open to having that discussion because at the Outreach Center opening, I talked to the captain in charge of our island, and he explained that unfortunately we had this bifurcation of the nuisance abatement board and the community policing in the same conversation, and they really should be separate conversations because it sounds as if the community policing functions will be a little different than what we had thought, not in a bad way, but in a good way. And I think it certainly would be worth exploring much more extensively. Not necessarily saying we should do it, but I think we certainly ought to explore it a lot more because I think there's some real positive benefits to it.
Mr. Mayor, I had a question about that. So I thought, and maybe I was mistaken, but I thought we were going to have perhaps a public safety committee kind of say, okay, we did it, we get this number of officers, and this is what they would do, and this is where they would do it at, or some of that type of conversation, or is that something the council wants to engage into?
I tell you the truth, I would prefer that they take it up.
I'm just raising it because I think details beyond the concept of whether you think it's good, it's needed or not, but then there's a whole bunch of details that have to be quickly layered on to whether you think it's good or not. So someone's got to kind of delve into that detail.
I think that's a great idea, but the only confusion I have, and I love utilizing the Public Safety Committee, but the mayor asked the chair of the Public Safety Committee, who's very able, did you look into the nuisance abatement board, and for whatever reason, the Public Safety Committee believes their charge is a bit different than what we thought maybe it was, and I'm open to expanding their jurisdiction so they could look at some things like this, but he seemed to think that wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he seem to sort of think that there was
Well,
John Goggin?
Yeah,
You asked him
I
that
could reach out to
question.
this, I could reach out to the chair and see if he feels that his committee doesn't have the core skill sets to deal with the issue. Let you know that, and then you could set up a select committee to kind of work through those details. Because I think it's very important that if you make the leap to contract for enhanced services, we have a good understanding of exactly what we're going to get and a way to measure what we're getting a year or 2 years later to see if in fact it's working the way we had hoped it would.
I have a real hesitancy with having them put a bunch of work into something that I'm not sure we really want. And I have to tell you that people who came to present to us, who gave us information, if it was really that great, they should have convinced me. And I wasn't convinced. It sounded to me like we were going to spend $200,000 on making sure that people didn't ride electric bicycles under power on the sidewalks. So I just want to pull back from this a little bit and just let you know that if people are going to put a lot of work into this, I think that there's a myriad of reasons it's a bad idea. Started out small in Bonita, and now they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this. It just grows. A. B. Me. It exaggerates inequities in our county. I said this before. Sheriffs should be providing an appropriate level of service to our entire county. You shouldn't have a situation where people who can afford it, who are in a more affluent community, pay the sheriff to get extra enhanced services, and the people in Lehigh don't get that. I know that Jim thinks that it's a battle that we can't win, but I think that if we think the sheriff should be giving us more services, the community should all get together. Bonita should be in favor of this rather than them paying directly for more services. The community should all go to the commissioners and say, look, we want you to fund the sheriff to give us a higher level of service everywhere in our county, not just for the town of Fort Myers Beach or Bonita, where people are paying more for it. To me, it exaggerates the inequities in our community. And it just strikes me as very unfair in my core. Besides the fact that I think it's a lot of money to spend for things that I haven't heard are worth that amount of money. And I was also very, very disenchanted to hear when the suggestion was made, hey, can we try it for $100,000, a smaller amount, just to try it out? And we were told no, just a flat no. It didn't seem to me like working together. So I just liked everybody to think about that before we even, I'd hate to send this to the Public Safety Committee and have them put hours of work into it. Exploring issues like liability, John. What liability does this now give us? Is the town going to be named in every lawsuit where the police now get sued? Right now, we're not a named party. If someone sues the Lee County Sheriff's Department, it's the Lee County Sheriff's Department. If it's one of our community officers who's involved in a situation or an altercation, the town's going to be added as a named party every time. So I think there are big aspects to this that people haven't thought about. And before we give it to the Public Safety Committee and have them do a lot of work, same way I don't want to insult our Audit Committee, I don't want to have our Public Safety Committee do a bunch of work and then us say, hey, well, it really costs too much for what we're getting out of it.
So then maybe, Mr. Mayor, the thing to do is have you all have a discussion one more time and see if there's a consensus about this. And then, if it's something that there's a majority interest in, then, give it to the committee to work out the details, or a committee.
I think the one role that the Public Safety Committee can do, because they're a Public Safety Committee, and I know I've been on the Public Safety Committee, and they tend to be focused on Estero Boulevard, which is ironic because it's a county boulevard, which we have limited things that we can do. But we have 4 different tools that we're looking at for public safety. We have neighborhood watch, we have potential of cameras, we have a nuisance abatement board, and we have community policing. That seems to me that we have this Public Safety Committee that seems to be right up their alley. We can give them what resources they need to be able to make analysis of what the costs and what the liabilities would be for these different things and what their effectiveness might be, and then come back to us and advise us on what they discovered. I think that'd be right, not instead of just saying one thing, give them the whole plate, saying our goal, the task is to do what we can to lower the criminal activity level and make people safer from criminal activity, specifically, and they are the Public Safety Committee.
The community policing really didn't have to do with criminal activity. Everything I heard was more traffic enforcement, public safety kinds of issues.
Extras.
Yeah, extras. We get protection for criminal activity now, we better be.
Well, I think there's enhanced protection because they're not just chasing down e-bikes on a sidewalk, but you just said yourself, that creates a safety issue. They're the Public Safety Committee.
I don't disagree with that. It was your use of the word criminal activity that I don't want to get confused that community policing is going to have to do with criminal activity on the beach, because I don't think that's what it's for. It's not.
Pardon my interruption, Madam Vice Mayor. I just think the arguments that you're making are exactly the reason why I think it should go to the Public Safety Committee for discussion, so that they can discuss it as well as the community to be able to come out and share their thoughts one way or another. Essentially, it should be up to them. It should be up to the people either want it or they don't. I think to just
And I think
dismiss it is doing us an
people want it
injustice.
because it sounds like a great idea. I haven't heard John disagree with me about the potential liabilities that this causes, that we're going to get named in every lawsuit.
Yeah, you almost, just by definition, I think that what we can do is consult with the League of Cities, which I also believe is probably Bonita Springs insurance carrier, to see how many additional claims have been filed naming Bonita Springs as a result of their contract. So we can certainly look into it, but as a general, no, I don't disagree with your statement, Mayor. Vice Mayor.
Okay. Well, guess we can put it on the agenda again and talk about it ourselves, and then decide whether we want to send it to the task force.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think it sounds to me like there needs to be a discussion among the five of you, and I don't know that we want to have that M&P session tonight, so.
Or put it on an M&P or something like that. All right, that sounds good. That's, work on it, Dan. Okay.
I was asking.
I don't have anything else to add to this discussion. So, is there anything else for the good of the order here this evening?
I had one more issue that I wanted to bring up, and
Okay.
sorry about it.
It's all right.
I know it's an elephant in the room, and made a promise to bring it up, so I'm going to bring it up. There's been some concern or some people that would like us to revisit the mask mandate that we have in place. So I thought I told the people I would put it out there to the will of the council to see if there's any interest in bringing up that discussion again.
I don't think it's time.
Either.
I'm encouraged by the decrease in numbers, but I think there's some people who, when they get to the finish line, they run through it, and others start to relax because they're getting close. I think we need to keep this on until we get to a more comfortable place.
The argument's being made, and I read these arguments too, that everything, the rates have come down so low in Lee County now, without a mask mandate. And I know all the comments that are going to be made right now, and I really don't care, so I'm going to tell you. Without a mask mandate, of course it came down, because everybody's wearing the masks. And another comment was, you don't need to tell the good people of Fort Myers Beach to wear masks. They know better. Who says we're telling the people of Fort Myers Beach? We had people at the time that were coming from the hottest spots in the country and the state coming here on a continuous basis, and still are. They're still coming here. So I say, keep wearing the masks. That's what I say. They can call me all the names that they call me and everything else. That's just the way I feel. The masks are working. They're working. They're keeping things down. They're keeping the people in Publix that serve us every day safe. CVS, all the other stores, the restaurants, they're keeping them safe. Now, they may complain about them. That it's an inconvenience to wear them during the day. I'm sorry about that. But this is a public health issue. It's not a political issue. It's not all this crying business on Facebook that's out there.
It's a health issue, and it's working. It's working. And until they come up with a real solution for this virus, these are the only methods that we have. It's working. And you're not going to convince me otherwise. Thank you. Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Second. No objection. We're adjourned at 7:30 on the nose.
No go Canes? Anybody?
Okay.